So that is a great question. And I'll say that my answer today might not be my answer in a month or two, because I think things are changing fast with artificial intelligence and its use in the pharmaceutical industry. So I actually see two ways that AI is currently changing things, and there's maybe a third way. So the first way is probably the very first thing is machine learning has been used for several years to do data analysis. I would say that the goal was to maybe replace population PK modeling with neural networks, and maybe a faster and more efficient way of creating models that would describe pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic data. I would say that that progress has been good but slow in that area, and there's not a lot of adoption, primarily because it's very exploratory at this stage and it's somewhat challenging to implement. The second area, which I think is exploding, is the use of large language models, or LLMs, to assist in doing daily activities. So there's various companies out there that offer regulatory intelligence products. And so you can go in and ask them a question. This is a custom built LLM. And you ask them a question like, hey, what drugs have been approved without, a CYP3A4 DDI study in the past? And it will search, it essentially searches the literature and prior approvals and can find examples. It can also read and understand guidances and make recommendations for you. And some companies that I know have even built custom-built AI tools that will actually build entire clinical development programs for you. So I think that's the emerging way, and that's the new way people are using it. Certainly, you could use free things like Grok or Gemini or ChatGPT to do similar things, but some of the custom-built ones are curated, so they have a little better information in them. I think the final area where AI can help is in the actual automation and execution of analysis activities. So it's one thing to say, hey, what do I need to do an analysis, or what's the right analysis, and use the LLM to give you information. It's sort of a fast encyclopedia of information. Another is to say, oh, I have this data set and I need to calculate the parameters. Can you do that for me? And then the AI can actually reach out and use tools that are available to it to do the calculations. I think that's the next stage. And so having tools that are actually able to integrate with AIs is probably the frontier, because now instead of just learning about what you need to do, the AI can actually help you get it done as well, so that you don't have to trouble yourself with learning all the ins and outs of various software packages. I'm just going to mention one area, which is more like regulatory strategy for clinical pharmacology. And I think that's the most ready to use out there. So using large language models, again, these are massive encyclopedias of information that can read and interpret, documents much faster than humans can. And then they can also pull information from those documents and collate it for us. And using these tools for regulatory intelligence is saying, hey, this is my situation. This is what I'm trying to do. What would you recommend based on prior approvals of products in this class, or of small molecules, or of large molecules? And then it can search that vast amount of data and information and come back with a reasonable response. I think that regulatory strategy approach is where AI can be really useful today in 2026. It still requires human expertise to interpret does that make sense. It may suggest you do something that's not reasonable for your drug or your compound or your target patient population. So you still need to apply the human experience to it. But if it can do 80% of the work for you, it gets you to a place that you're much further along. Before you can even, read all the materials you need to read, it has an answer for you that's a good starting point. Now, right now, the actual calculations and doing numerical analyses, I'm not aware of any AIs that are actually very facile at doing that for us. I think it's coming, and I think that's, like I said, the biggest opportunity in the future. But right now, they can just sort of spit written information back to you, and they can collate it and summarize it in a good way, but they can't run analyses. So humans are actually still running analyses. You have analysts out there that are using software, they're conducting analyses, they're reviewing diagnostic plots. But in the future, I actually think it'll be super exciting if AI systems can do that for the user and summarize it and say, hey, I tried 30 models and this is the best model. Or I calculated the parameters and did the dose response analysis and here are the results. That's going to be really useful to people in this field, because then it'll allow them to accomplish more with actually less effort. The biggest misconception I see when people are discussing adding AI to clinical pharmacology or pharmacokinetics is that it replaces human workers. And it happens on both sides. It happens on a management side, thinking, oh, if we don't need as many employees, we can save some money. It's a financial decision. And from the employee side, they're afraid that they're going to lose their job. And I actually think that's the worst misconception, because they're both wrong. Actually, what AI is going to allow people to do is it is going to allow individual scientists to do more science work and less busy work. So I call science work the scientific method, generating hypotheses, designing experiments, and then actually comparing experimental results to the hypothesis to either prove or disprove the hypothesis. That's scientific work, and we will almost always need humans to do that, because humans think outside the box. They think of possibilities that haven't happened yet or don't exist yet, and they want to test those hypotheses. And this is what AI will enable us to do as scientists, because it's going to run the experiments and do the analyses and come back with the answers. And so then we can say, that wasn't a good hypothesis, or that the experiment didn't validate the hypothesis. What should we do next? So the scientists are going to spend more time doing science work and less time with the busy, mundane, routine work of filling out tables with numbers to submit to regulatory authorities. So I think organizations should stop thinking about AI as a cost savings measure to scale down, and people need to stop thinking about losing their jobs to AI. Instead, think of them as enabling tools and how they can do it more efficiently. Maybe think back to horse and buggies and cars. Yes, cars put horse and buggies out of business, but in reality, what cars enabled is people to get from A to B faster and more efficiently than a horse and buggy. So all those people that were in the horse and buggy repair business, maybe they did something else, or maybe they actually moved over and started repairing automobiles, and they took all their knowledge about horse and buggies and moved it where is appropriate over to automobiles. That same thing is going to happen. We're going to need all the people in pharmacokinetics and clinical pharmacology now, but we're going to need them to do something different, which is do their science work instead of the busy work. AI is a tool that allows for repeatability and consistency. And pharmacokinetics has been a scientific discipline that has lacked conformity, and for the most part, over its history. There's always the exception. There's always the opportunity to inject personal expertise or bias into an analysis. And I think that hasn't necessarily been good for our discipline. In one way, it's created this illusion that it's very, very complicated, what we do. And in reality, it's relatively simple. What it hasn't done is allowed us to standardize and be more efficient in a data workflow so that we can get better data coming in. So just as an example, if you're analyzing data from a clinical study and there's, samples were taken at the wrong time and, you missed something, You see that at the end. The study's done. The patients are home. It's all over. You can't fix it. You can identify it's a problem, but you can't fix it. The problem was that scientist that had that knowledge and information wasn't present or wasn't involved at the design phase and the interaction with clinical sites to ensure that they conducted this portion of the protocol consistent or accurately, or that the protocol was actually clear to the people executing the protocol so that they understood it. So if we could move those individuals into that space where they're interacting more up front to make sure the experiment is done correctly, rather than having all that expertise on the back end, seeing it and identifying problems, we're going to solve more problems and we're going to have a higher quality data. And so I think we need to embrace standardization and analysis. And you know what? The half-life estimate that the AI system estimates isn't going to be the same that every single pharmacokineticist estimates. That's okay, because one half-life estimate does not cause the rise or fall of a single drug. Instead, what we want is better designed experiments where we get more consistent results. And if we put our people on the design portion, again, doing the science work of hypothesis generation, experimental design, instead of on the analysis portion, I think we're going to get more value for the work that those people do. I think the whole world opens up to ideas that we had never considered before. When AI starts handling analysis and essentially eliminates the need for humans to spend their time running a non-compartmental analysis or even building a population PK model, I think new questions are going to be asked, and we're going to start doing more meta-analyses. So analyzing data from multiple studies and having more complex statistical analyses across those to answer questions with data that we already have in hand that maybe we didn't have before. And so I really think we're going to have an explosion in new ideas about how to analyze all the data that we have. Another opportunity is cross-program analyses. So many of the large pharmaceutical companies have tens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of drugs that have been in the development pipeline at some stage. We can now mine that data with AI and look for trends and things that happened across that, distribution of molecules and drug products. And we might be able to identify new opportunities for drugs that have maybe been shelved or set aside because the team that was working on them wasn't aware of an opportunity that existed. And so repurposing of old candidate drugs is a great opportunity for AI to kind of jump in and help identify new options for some of these compounds. I think that's very hard to predict. I think immediately we're going to see advances in regulatory strategies based on the use of AI to essentially read all the prior approvals and what's been done in the past and propose novel regulatory strategies for approval. So I think we'll see something there. I would like to think that we're going to see some improvement in clinical studies. People might use AI to do better at recruiting and enrolling the right types of patients, or maybe even identifying the right types of patients for which a drug might be effective. So I can see in those areas. The longer term, what I would like to see is AI involved more in clinical trial simulation. I don't think we do enough clinical trial simulation in our discipline, and we don't take advantage of model-based drug development by doing clinical trial simulations. And I think AI might help us get there, because clinical trial simulation is technically complex because there's so many moving parts. And I think that's something that AI can help with. It helps with technically complex ideas. and systems, and then it can run analyses that are complex like that. So that's where I would like to see it long term, but I don't think we're there in a year or two. I think it might be 3 to 5 years before we see routine clinical trial simulation through AI tools. So in the next 5 to 10 years, I think AI being able to, number one, conduct analyses for users is going to be the first major breakthrough. So being able to give a data set to AI and give a protocol and then have AI go out and run the analysis and populate a report is going to be amazing. But I think that's only the first step. Once it can conduct analyses, then AI would be able to link different analyses together to do simulations, whether those are preclinical simulations to identify optimal doses for toxicology studies, or clinical trial simulation to look through different phase 2 and phase 3 study designs and evaluate different operational characteristics of studies to maximize the probability of success. I think that is the sort of the holy grail from my perspective today in 5 to 10 years. If we can get there, I think we have a fundamental shift in how we do drug development, because we're going to have a tool that can effectively in silico simulate many options before we actually dose a single patient. And then if we can do that, then our clinical trials become more efficient and effective. And in essence, we're going to run fewer clinical trials, but more targeted clinical trials with a greater probability of success outcome. And when that happens, we can become much more efficient at drug development, and we can get effective medications to patients more quickly. Aplos Analytics, our focus is building a tool to perform pharmacokinetic analyses in a repeatable and reproducible way through either manual human interaction with software or automation. And we want to partner with teams that are developing AI tools, because we think we have a tool that your AI agent can leverage and utilize. So if that AI agent knows what the data needs to look like, how to run the analysis, and then what the results are going to look like at the back end, that AI agent can then use our tool for its intended purpose. So I kind of think of an AI agent like a plumber or a carpenter or any kind of person that's going to do work, and they have various tools that they might use. A carpenter might have a saw and a screwdriver and a hammer and nails and screws. And we think of Aplos NCA being one of those tools, like a hammer or a wrench, that would be used by a person with a technical expertise. And so we think it's going to be an opportunity to standardize analyses and modernize it and make it much more efficient and easier to accomplish, but also more automatable, so that all this human capital can be used for that scientific work of hypothesis generation, experimental design, and then review of results. I think this is going to be the biggest change that we have in our discipline. Is many people have done a great job of learning a set of skills to use specific software packages. We all have preferences. Those preferences are based on our experience, but also what we've been exposed to. And the reality is that the tool isn't that important. What's important is the answers that the tool can give us once an analysis is conducted properly. And so sometimes I feel that many individuals have sort of considered their value in the ability to operate some software package, whether I'm a really good R programmer or I'm a terrible R programmer, or I'm really good at non-mem, or I'm really good at NLMXR or Monolix, whatever the software might be. I think in the future, individuals won't need to know how to use software. They'll just need to know what is it that they want to accomplish. Like, I need to build a population PK model, and here is my data. Can you do that for me? They need to understand, what is a population PK model? Why do we build it? What are the parts of a model that are important? And what are covariates? And which covariates do we want to test on which parameters? All those questions they'll need to understand and elucidate, but they won't need to know how to operate the software. I think this is very exciting. I'm good at certain software. I don't have any idea how to use other software. And honestly, it's a struggle to keep up with all the advancements that are made each year in all these software packages. But AI doesn't care. It can learn how to use software very, very quickly, and it can operate very, very, within the confines that are given each time there's an update. If I don't have to worry about how the software operates, but understand what I want to accomplish using the software, now I become much more powerful. And so, but that is a mindset shift. There are some people that are very, very comfortable and afraid, oh, I don't know much. You know a lot more than you think. Every software operator is an expert in what is quality data, what are problems in the data, what are issues that come up, what are outcomes that come out of the software. Now you need to apply that to designing better experiments and or ensuring that data is collected in accordance with the protocol plan more efficiently. And I think moving in that direction, it's going to open up a whole new world of work that only we have the expertise to help with. We're the only ones that are seeing the problems, so we're the only ones that are going to be able to provide solutions. We need to free ourselves from the time required to do the analyses so that we can have the time to propose solutions and iterate through solutions, and then implement those. So it's very popular right now to add AI to the name of your product, or maybe have a website URL .ai, or put it in a press release, or put it in your annual report that you're using artificial intelligence. That's fine. The companies that are really going to get value out of it are the ones that are actually leveraging and using it for a constructive purpose. So the companies that are actually doing regulatory strategy and leveraging AI tools and not fighting against them, those companies are going to have more success, and they're going to have more regulatory wins than the companies that are relying on expertise of one or two or three or a few human individuals. I'm not saying that AI is better than humans. What I'm saying is AI is more efficient at compiling and summarizing information than any single human ever will be. And I think leveraging that information is going to allow the human workers to do more exciting stuff and ask more interesting questions. And from a pharmacokinetic perspective, I think those that are able to build AI agents that can automate analyses will find themselves freeing up their human capital for amazing things. I know groups that have hundreds of pharmacokinetic or clinical pharmacology staff. Most of those staff are engaged in post-study analysis work. If you could take 80% of that staff and move it to do study design and pre-study, or ensuring that studies are executed effectively, that would be amazing. You'd have more efficient studies, you'd have more quality results, you'd have fewer errors in the studies, and you get better results and likely easier approvals. How many times have you run into a situation where a poorly conducted study gave bad data or poor data that was maybe contradictory to some other studies, and it caused you to have to run a whole nother study, or it caused you a lot of grief with a regulator because it was poorly done? If you can eliminate that, that frees up a lot of time to get good drugs approved. So I've heard it said before that good drugs get approved in spite of the development teams. In essence, we need to get out of the way, but we need to design good experiments and then help execute those good experiments. And let's let our automated systems analyze the data and produce the results.